Good start. Yeah, thank you very much, Howard. I've actually got 5 or 6 people that I'm mentoring at the moment from the Trust and others. And I'm always happy to take on more as well. So please do get in touch if you're interested. But the purpose of today, it really is designed to be an interactive session, not just us talking at you. You know, we want to hear from you guys as well. And it's really your questions that make this sort of session. So we want to hear from as many of you as possible, but it is just about the whole topic of sports journalism and broadcasting. And we've tried to get all bases covered with writing and broadcasting and reporting. So, you know, we're hoping to pass on the benefit of our experience, some helpful tips, some guidance along the way, plenty of insight from our own careers. And like I say, it's your questions which are really going to make the difference. So if there's burning questions that you've got, then please hold on to them, and we'll come to them shortly. But first of all, if I could just introduce everyone on the panel. I'm sure you'll know a lot of these guys, but I'll just go through them one by one. So Ellen here, Ellen Ellard, freelance reporter for BBC Radio 5 Live Sport. I'm sure you've seen her on Final Score, commentator for the Women's Super League World Feed, presenter for Manchester City Football Club. I may have missed out 1 or 2 things there, Ellen. I think she started out BBC Radio Cambridgeshire, working across their sport coverage and presenting the station's BBC Music Introducing show, which gave her opportunities to present and create content for both Radio 1 and 6 Music. Ellen's also a senior fellow of the John Schofield Trust, and she also mentors on our 2023 programme for journalism students. So I'll come to you in a minute, Ellen. Also with us is Nate Williams. He's chair of the Ability Group in Sports, with the acronym TAGS, the first network for disabled people in sports media roles. He's a producer and a journalist. He's covered many events in sports over his long career. He's worked for the BBC Sport, Daily Star, and the Sydney Morning Herald as well. And also joining us is Carl Anka, who I'm sure you know, staff writer at the Athletic FC, with a focus on Manchester United. Co-wrote 2 best-selling books with Marcus Rashford. You Are a Champion, which my son's got, and You Can Do It as well, which is next on his list. And also Carl is a senior fellow of the Trust as well. He also mentors on our 2023 programme for journalism students. So I think a fantastic panel, and I think the best thing to do is just to hear from each of them first of all. And I'd just like, if you can all just give us a little bit of background into your career, why you decided to get into sports journalism, and what does your career look like so far. So Ellen, would you mind going first?
Yeah, no worries. Kind of like you said in my bio, mine's a bit all over the place. But I was always really lucky that from probably about the age of 13, I always knew I wanted to get into radio. I was just so lucky to have this like real calling towards broadcasting, and to start with on the radio side of things, and audio. I think just from like long car journeys, listening to football commentaries or Radio 4, Radio 1, wherever we went, wherever our family went, we always had radio on. So I was really drawn to that, while just loving sport. Competed a lot in athletics when I was little, well, pretty much all the way through up until the time I left school. Played a lot of football before I joined secondary school, and then like a lot of girls in the country, our secondary school just didn't offer football or rugby for girls, so ended up doing the more traditional hockey, rounders, netball, all of that, and then athletics sort of became my focus. I decided fairly early on that I didn't think uni would be for me. I still went and applied for university, got offers, but I sort of had it in the back of my mind that I was more of a hands-on learner. I just really enjoyed the work experience opportunities I had. Done a lot of community radio. There was 2, really lucky in Peterborough. We had 2 community radio stations, which, considering Peterborough is not the biggest city around, quite lucky to have opportunities at both of them. And so then when I was just before I was 18, I had an opportunity to do a day of work experience at BBC Radio Cambridgeshire. Absolutely loved it. Just answering the phones, talking to people, really threw myself into it. don't know where I got the confidence from at the time, but I was picking up phones to people, chatting away, going on the show, reading the weather, the travel, stuff like that. And that was just one day, but loved it, kept in touch with everyone. Then I knew as soon as I turned 18, I'm a September birthday, so I just started my last year of sixth form, but I knew that I could be employed by the BBC, because you obviously, with like a lot of broadcasters and a lot of companies around the UK, can't get employed properly until you're 18. So I waited. Then as soon as I was 18, emailed the people that I did work experience with, the station editor, I was like, let me come in, I'll make tea, I'll tidy up, I'll do anything, I just want to be there. Luckily, because BBC Radio Cambridge had a base in Peterborough, the people who were living in Cambridge didn't want to travel to Peterborough anymore. So they thought, we'll put Ellen on. Started as a broadcast assistant. Sometimes those roles now within the BBC are called journalism coordinators, but same thing. It was making teas, it was calling guests, getting people up on the phone, writing basic scripts. Did that through my last year of sixth form, and then decided at that point that I didn't feel like I needed to go to uni because I already had my foot in the door. I thought I'd rather continue with the opportunities I was getting, some sport reporting shifts, some presenting shifts, like I say, covering the BBC Music Introducing show, which I then got a few years later, and I then became the main presenter of that. So I then sort of swayed more into music for a little bit with the opportunities that came at Radio 1 and Six Music, which I was really grateful for. But deep down, I always knew it was going to be sport where I wanted to end up. So lockdown hit, which was very weird. I don't know what everyone else's experience was, but working for the BBC, we were seen as essential workers, because I was also working for the breakfast show at the time. I sort of spread, local radio is weird, so I sort of spread all over the place, doing sport, occasionally covering the Faith show on a Sunday morning. I sort of did a bit of everything, as you tend to do at local radio. So spent the whole of lockdown still working. I was really grateful for that opportunity, but then decided that probably aged around 21 that I wanted to move on from local radio and I wanted to focus more on sport. Job came up at Man City to be their new stadium announcer for the women's team. And I was like, this is my dream job. This is absolutely perfect. I remember it very vividly, the day that I applied for it, because I sat on the floor of my flat pretty much by myself. The Rule of Six had just come in. All my friends had gone on holiday. I said, I'm not going to be the one that goes. I'll be the one that stays back at home. So you can all go. You can all go on your lovely little trip and I'll stay back. So I sat, probably, it's not a very typical 21-year-old thing to be doing, but having a glass of wine, going through LinkedIn on a Friday night, saw this job come up for Man City, and then 6 months of quite rigorous application process later, got the job. Then had to find more work because I couldn't just move up to Manchester to work for Man City with the, you know what the women's season's like, it's so sparse, the games, that just wouldn't carry me through. Thankfully, a job came up at 5 Live. I had a few good words from what I'd already done at the BBC, still went through the boarding process, and then moved up here May 2021. And then from there, it's all sort of just gone from there, really. Was behind the scenes with 5 Live for a long while, but knew I wanted to be on air. Went through the process that everyone has to do to get on air as a reporter with 5 Live. So you're going to have like your reporter assessment, where you go and do a reporter shift, but it doesn't end up going anywhere. They decide whether they'd like you on air or not. That was at the end of last season. And since then, I've done 30 games for Sky, for 5 Live now this season, and started with Sky at the start of February, doing both in vision and then out of vision for Soccer Saturday and Soccer Special.
Amazing. And what I would, the couple of things I take from that story you've just told us, number one is the word fortunately came up a couple of times, and we've all had bits of good fortune along the way, everyone in the industry. But it's not just about getting the good fortune, it's about grabbing that opportunity, isn't it? And you talked about a lot of energy and enthusiasm there, perhaps doing things which no one else wanted to do, just to make sure that you were involved. And that's what I always tell people, is that counts for so much, doesn't it? Just having that enthusiasm to be part of it. Absolutely.
It was, I think it really helped that I had that call in for radio since I was so young. So when I got up to 5 Live, obviously like the pinnacle of sports broadcasting. For me, I was like just soaking it all in. I was just like a kid in a candy shop, you know. Ian Dennis is walking past. You know, there's Kelly Cates is there, Mark Chapman's talking to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. But then soaking that up and being keen to do stuff, and like I didn't just become a reporter like that after being a broadcast assistant on 5 Live. Every weekend I was free and not either working on 5 Live programming, where I was staff for probably about 12 months, or working at Man City on the side. I was making sure that I was borrowing the ISDN kit, and I was going out and practice reporting and going to the football editor saying, please, can you get me accreditation for this game? I've seen no one's there, but I'd really like to go and practice report. And it's, you know, seeing the opportunities that are there, finding them as well. But, you know, if they are, like you say, put in front of you, like grabbing them and just running with it, because you never know where it might lead. Like I had no clue that by doing some practice reports of WSL games, that I then might end up, you know, working on Soccer Saturday. But you never know where it might lead. So it's, you don't want to waste those opportunities. You've got to grab them and just be enthusiastic with it. And
have you had anyone mentoring you? Have you had colleagues who've really helped you along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was really lucky when I was at Radio Cambridgeshire. I was 19 and I was doing so I mentioned athletics. I do a lot of athletics commentary as well for European athletics. That's like I love working in football, but when I work in athletics, I work in triathlon, like that's like the sport that I grew up in. So I find that like a lot more natural. Football is something I've really had to work hard for, because like I said, the opportunities weren't there for me to play through my teenage years. And I was 19 at Radio Cambridgeshire, and they had like a day where Rob Nothman, who a lot of you might know, came in, and me and another commentator had an opportunity to have our stuff listened to. All I had at the time was athletic stuff. But Rob was really great with it. He just has a way of giving you advice, but in like a really friendly way. So I listened back and it was absolute rubbish. Like it was awful commentary, but Rob just made it seem like there was like potential there. He gave me a real belief in myself. And then I've been grateful to, like really lucky to work with him pretty much all the way through when I moved up to 5 Live. He does a lot of work with the 5 Live team. So I worked with him there, and I'm still working with him now. And he's just brilliant. So what I would say on that front though is what I found really useful is I'm really lucky to have a lot of people in my circle who are quite high up in the industry, who know a lot, but I think it's quite important to keep the group of people that you take advice from, sort of narrow that down so you haven't got too many voices, because it is quite subjective at times. So people might have certain opinions. So I try and keep, like Rob would be one, there's a few others who I just say are like my core team, who I ask advice from and take that on board, because sometimes having too many mentors and too much advice can lead you sort of into a patch where you're not really sure where to go. Yeah, no, great advice. I'll come back to you, Ellen. Nate, let me come on to you. Apologies for my flickering screen. I will sort that out in a second. Tell us a little bit about how you've got to where you are, Nate.
Oh, how long have we got? I'm Nate Williams. I've been in this industry for 14 years. I started in 2010 at University of Huddersfield, doing a sports journalism course directly, because before 2003, I think it was, like you could only do journalism and then you could specialize in your third year. But in 2008, Huddersfield developed a course and I was like the third cohort. The reason I wanted to get into the sports media industry was because as a wheelchair user, I couldn't get a ticket to a game. Like literally, you think of the thousands of people in the stadiums, there's literally like 1/10 of disabled people in there because there's not enough wheelchair spaces. I think Anfield has 270, Wembley has 300. So you think about thousands. So I never actually got to go to a game until I was like 14. And then I was like, you know what? If I had a job in this industry, they can't turn me away, even though they did try, and we'll get onto that in a little bit in the session. But I did my course at university, and I was actually quite lucky that I chose where I did, because my tutor was the rugby league correspondent for the Times at the time, Chris Irvine, and he introduced me to people at the RFL. And I've always wanted to go to a Paralympics, either as an athlete or, you know, as a media person. And the person who had just left the RFL got the head media job at the International Paralympic Committee. So in my second year at the age of 19, there was an opportunity to go to the London 2012 Paralympic Games with the IPC as a reporter. And I just lit up. I was like, this is my chance to go to a Paralympic Games. And at the time, a lot of my colleagues were turning it down because the IPC said, we'll only pay you like £20 a day for food and things like that. And they were like, it's nothing in London, doesn't stretch far. But me, I was like, I don't care what I'm getting paid. I'm at a Paralympic Games. And so I went to the Paralympic Games, and, you know, when you do a major event, you don't sleep. But I'll just warn you now, you do not sleep. I was on my knees after about 6 days at 19, just like doing reports 24/7. And then, like Ellen was saying, like sometimes opportunities just present themselves. So on the second day, what's the problem for the Paralympics is it's always in August, September at the start of the Premier League season. So a few of our commentators dropped out to take Premier League contracts. So my boss came rushing in and he said, does anybody know anything about wheelchair basketball? And I sort of like put my hand up like this saying, I played for 8 years. Is that good enough? I'm like, well, yeah, you're on. And they threw me on with no team sheet. So I was doing like Turkey versus Spain. And it was the horriblest commentary I've ever done. It just goes to show you that like commentators, the best do their prep work months, years, like, you know, they've got logbooks. I had nothing, and I was just going, and it's a basket for number 10 from Turkey. Like they didn't have any names on the back. So, oh my God, that was funny. And then Sir Philip Craven, who was the president of the IPC at the time, he called me into his office saying, like, can you look over my speech? And then Sebastian Coe walked in and like shook my hand and had a chat with me. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. I want to do major events all the time. By the time I got to the end of it and I saw like Coldplay and Rihanna like doing the closing ceremony, I was like, I need to do more of this. This is what I want to do. And then I thought, what other sports do I like? And I was really keen on boxing. Joe Calzaghe was one of my heroes. And I was fortunate enough to go to Sheffield with the GB boxing team and sort of like create a niche there where I'd be interviewing the current world champions, actually, Sandy Ryan and Joe Cordina, that won world titles at the weekend. So I was interviewing them for like just a website that I'd built myself. And boxing was so accessible back then because Matchroom were very small. They only had a few fighters in their stable. So off the back of that, I went to some weigh-ins in Liverpool, St George's Hall, introduced myself to Eddie Hearn, said, can I come to a fight? And he said, yeah, no problem. Like, you know, we're all about exposure. And I built really good relationships with people like Carl Froch, Kell Brook. And then eventually the big man, AJ, came through. And I can confirm that Nando's black card does exist because I've dined on it. Like there's this rumor that the Nando's black card, like only the top people get it. AJ's got one, and so is Nicola Adams. But so I've got some fantastic stories. But then when all that stopped after university, I was sort of a bit arrogant, where I was like, I've got this great experience, I got a 2-1 degree, and I'll walk into a newspaper. Like this experience, it's so unique, nobody else has it. And I was still getting turned down for jobs. And I remember phoning up the editor of the Nottingham Post saying, like, I've got like Carl Froch's number in my phone, I can give you an interview if you want. And like, why am I not getting an interview? And he just said, you're not NCTJ qualified. And I was like, oh, so I've got to study again after 3 years and try and get this qualification. And then I sort of like gave up a little bit because like the money wasn't there. You know, they quoted me a figure, and I just was like, I can't do this. I've come from a working class single family in Merseyside, and like I say, it was really hard because that period spanned for 14 months, and I just kept applying and applying. And I was like, and my mum, bless her, she had to drag me to the job centre to sign on for a period, and I was like, oh, I can't do this anymore. But then, as Ellen said, you know, sometimes opportunities present themselves, and I got a phone call from a guy called Nick Dixon at the BBC who remembered me doing a runner shift while I was at University of Huddersfield for the BBC Sports Personality of the Year. And he said, I've got some freelance work for you. It's only 30 days. But I was like, no, Nick, I'm all in. So I went to Media City, drove there every day. Like Ellen, I was answering the phones. I was calling people like Harry Redknapp, Loro, like just to react to football. And then I sort of like, within those 30 days, I used my contacts that I'd built from rugby league, boxing, Paralympics to just get people on the air. And sometimes you just need that bit of luck in terms of the headlines as well. So I remember when Ben Flower was the first rugby league player to be red carded in the Super League Grand Final. And I was like, I've got just the person. I've got the person he punched. So we got him. I phoned him up. I phoned Lance up and I said, Lance, how's your head, first of all? And then, you know, can you do an interview on 5 Live? And then that got me more trust within my editors. And then another story turned up where, like, you know, sometimes they give you these stories where they just ring around and they'll say no comment. So Malky Mackay, who was a Wigan manager at the time, he was like being suspended for some racist or sexist, I can't remember what, but it was really bad. And I had to ring up all Wigan sponsors and saying, like, have you got any comment on this? And I rang up a kitchen supplier sponsor, and they said, we're dropping our sponsorship of Wigan Athletic because of this message. And I remember Richard Burgess, who was the head of news and sport, coming up to me saying, can you get this guy on TV, radio, and on and do a little piece about it? And I was like, okay. And then I just like went to work. And like I said, working at the BBC was like a dream for me. It was what I wanted to do. When Media City opened in 2011, I said to my parents, I said, I'm going to work there. And I eventually did, because that 30-day stint turned into 4 years. And, you know, I used my knowledge of the Paralympics to do the digital lead for BBC in 2016. And then I wanted a bit more of a full-time responsibility. So I applied for a job with all this knowledge of, like, you know, I've got people on the radio, I've got contacts, I've written for the website, I've got byline pieces. And just before I left, I actually broke my first story, which was AJ versus Klitschko at Wembley on April 29th. It's the first. I went down to a Manchester weigh-in and I just asked Eddie about it. And I got that on BBC Sport, my first exclusive. And I thought, this is going to be like a shoe-in for a contract, surely. Arrogance again. And they said, oh, you were 15th on the list and we had to narrow it down to 14. I didn't even get an interview. So I was like heartbroken. I was like, oh, this is not, I can't do it anymore. I've been here for 4 years. I'll go out and turn freelance and see what more events I can do. And then, you know, I just turned my hand to anything. I wasn't like a writer. I was also a social media editor. I did a bit of work for the ATP and the WTA. And then the best job I'd ever had was actually for a German press agency. And this is where the Sydney Herald comes from, because I've never actually worked for them, but I bet you they've taken my copy. So I wanted to work on AJ Klitschko after breaking the story. I wanted to be there at Wembley Stadium with the biggest heavyweight fight there's ever been. And all the British newspapers were turning me down, saying, we've got our fight correspondent, he's going to do it, or this person going to do it. There was literally no space in the British media. Everybody wanted to do that fight that had jobs. So I went a bit left field and I started looking at Klitschko. I was like, Klitschko, what's connections he's got? He's Ukrainian, he speaks German. So I was like, let's email all the, I actually hammered LinkedIn that night and I said like German press agency, DPA came up and I just sent a message saying, I've been covering boxing for a while. I was wondering if you guys are coming over to cover the Klitschko fight. He said, no, but you can if you want. So I phoned the press officer up immediately saying, I've got a pass. I've surely got a pass for this because, like I say, I've got a place, I've got somebody to work for. So they got me in because Matchroom knew me for a very long time. And yeah, I did a report and I thought it was just going to be a one-time gig. But then 2 months later, the editor emailed me back saying, our tennis guy has just retired. Do you want the gig to go to Wimbledon and the French Open in the same year? I was like, yes, please. And I did that for 2 years. And the best final I'd ever done was Roger Federer versus Novak Djokovic, 2019, the only ever 12-set all final. And I was in the best spot that any reporter could have dreamed of because I was in a wheelchair, which is like, you know, the sweetest thing as well. Like use your disadvantages to your advantage, because there was no room in the commentary boxes where they'd been housing me all the 2 weeks. And there was no route. I couldn't get to the press box either. So I was like, oh crap, the biggest game of the tennis, like in tennis history. And I'm going to have to do it from the media center. But they said, no, we'll get you a ticket. And they actually got me on the court, on the court where there's like 2 wheelchair spaces at the back of the court. So if you ever watch that game, if you're in tennis, if you see a guy in the corner with a MacBook, that's me. So yeah, I was working for DPA for 2 years, and then off the back of that, they turned me into their Premier League correspondent in the pandemic, which was very weird, as Ellen says. You know, very quiet atmosphere. Like, it just never gave the games any lift. So I was sort of like in two minds, saying, like, I'm privileged to be here because nobody else is allowed. But at the same time, it's not the same. The atmosphere is just not there. Atmosphere lifts football. And then obviously with the pandemic and all cost cutting, they actually scrapped the entire English service that I was working for. So stopped working for them for a while, went back to social media, did a bit of sub editing on the Daily Mail. My friend who graduated in the same course for me, he's actually the sports editor of the Daily Star. So that's how I got that job. And then, yeah, just mulled around for a bit. And then another prayer from heaven came up where I was thinking, like, in the pandemic, the career's dead, it's going nowhere. And then a friend of mine who was the producer for Channel 4 at the last 2 Paralympics saying, I'm leaving Channel 4 to do an on-screen job for BBC. And I think you're the perfect guy for the job. So I applied to the production company Whisper. This guy had obviously really backed me. And I got the job with no TV experience, never done a shoot before. And I had to plan 7 in 2 months. And I had to learn all budgeting and everything, all different kinds of editing, directing athletes, some of which were a bit moody. So you have to sort of, like, you know, balance the situation out. So I actually did that gig then because Beijing was so close because they delayed the game. So Tokyo happened in August 2021. Beijing 2022 was in March. So they kept me on for that. And then now I'm at IMG as an assistant producer in Stockley Park and doing some EuroLeague basketball and then golf in the summer, I think. So, yeah, it's been a wild one.
Bit of everything. A few things I take from your story. Number one, peaks and troughs. And yeah. I think everyone in the industry will really recognize that. Just when you think you've got it nailed, a door slams in your face unexpectedly. Number two, and I mean this in a really nice way, is that you had to be quite ballsy, and you can have all the talent in the world, but if you're a shrinking violet, you wouldn't have survived that hustle, I don't think. Is that right? Yeah,
definitely. You have to you develop it as you get, like, as a disabled person, you have naturally a thick skin anyway, because I'll tell you, like, as I'll go into the politics of things, the first football club I applied to do a match report for my course, I emailed them saying I was a disabled sports journalism student. I needed to do a game, and they said, sorry, our facilities aren't accessible for you. You can't come to the game, but we wish you all the best in your studies. I emailed them 2 weeks later with the same name, didn't change my name. I thought about it. I thought about faking my name, hiding my disability and all this. But I emailed them with the same name and just said I was a student coming to a game to do a match report for my course. And they said, yep, no problem. Your press pass is here. And then when I turned up, they turned white as ghosts. They were like, oh my God, we've never seen a person in a wheelchair before. Like, what do we do? Like, because it's a rarity. Like even to this day, I've done all these amazing events. And with the exception of tennis, because of the wheelchair tennis players, in football press boxes, in boxing events, in Vegas, where I was at Wilder Fury, I was the only wheelchair user in the entire global press. It's like, it's so rare. And that's why I sort of formed tags off the back of Beijing, because like I want more disabled people to come, and I want them to realize it can be accessible if it's adapted enough. So yeah, you have to have a thick skin, otherwise you're just not going to survive. Because I've got this picture that I have on my Instagram, and I look at it all the time. It's like, it's two people digging towards some diamonds, and there's one person who's just about to crack the diamonds open, and he walks away. But the other guy, who's far, far back from the diamonds, he keeps digging and digging and digging. So that's a very powerful image for me, because it just goes to show, the moment you think this isn't for you or you're about to quit, it could be the turning point of your career. Like, you could get a phone call the next day, or if you stop trying, then it won't happen. So, like I say, that's the advice I'd give to everyone on this call. Just keep trying if you really want to be in this industry.
And just for anyone wondering about what you said about the NCTJ qualification, I do have one of those, and the reason they said that is because it covers media law, and they're very nervous about people that don't have that, even with all the experience you had. And actually, the NCTJ have realised this, and instead of having to be part of a degree, they've now started a one-year course. And I have known people who've decided to just do that course rather than go to uni, and you still end up with the same qualification. So it is worth thinking about for some people. Carl, I'm going to come to you. Same question, really. Tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are now.
I'm going to do a cheat here and do a here's one I made earlier. So throughout the pandemic, I did a podcast series with my friend who asked me this question, and I just went, right, okay, if anyone asks, here's an episode of a podcast where I just talk about my entire career from the year I graduated to 2020. I think it's really important when we talk about our journalist careers, we always mention the year we graduated, the year we start getting into big jobs, and the year when we do things, because especially now we're journalists or sports journalists, we're working in an online space. So when I graduated, it was 2012, 2013. And if you were on Twitter and you had more than 1,000 followers, you were a big deal. If you had a blue tick, that was a big deal. Whereas now it's 2023. And if you're on Twitter, you've got a blue tick, I'm probably going to block you on site because you're trying to sell me cryptocurrency, right? And the internet and sports media and everything has changed dramatically in the last decade. If you think about the record signing in 2023 was Gareth Bale, 85 million to Real Madrid, and now the record signing is Neymar for 222 million. We're now seeing players go for 100 million in football. I think while I like talking about my career, a lot of the advice I can give you is based on what's happening now rather than something I did 5 years ago, because there was a point in time where everyone thought we had to pivot to video and learn Facebook Live, and it turned out they absolutely goosed the algorithm and we got fired, especially the freelancers. So I'm always slightly wary when I go, and I did this, and I did this, and I did this, and I did this, because some of those scenarios just aren't possible anymore. Yeah,
I hear you, and I've got exactly the same issue with the path into commentary that I took isn't available anymore, because everyone of my age would have come through local commercial radio, and that's died now. And they don't cover football anymore, so people are going into it in a different way. But can I ask you about I mentioned to Ellen about mentors and colleagues and how they helped you. If you've got any stories like that you can give us.
Loads. So I worked at a place called Sabotage Times on a long unpaid internship in 2013. I hope everyone listening here, if anyone offers you to do an unpaid internship, tell them Anka from The Athletic said no, and they can come yell at me instead. And there was a wonderful gentleman there called Owen Blackhurst, who then went on to create Mundial magazine with a bunch of other very, very clever individuals. And Owen really helped mold my writing style, helped me understand how to do column pieces, helped me understand the value of writing things only to 800 words, even if I was trying to write things for 1,500. He was very good at showing me I didn't have to cram every single reference into pieces and try and be really, really smart. He once said, never end with a quote. He goes, he really liked jazz music and guitar music, and he said, stop trying to muck around with the fretboard and just play the power chords when you do your conclusion. He said, when you're trying to make an argument, especially in footballing argument, imagine you started a fight in a pub, and then you're using the rest of the argument, the rest of the piece to convince everyone, oh no, I didn't mean to punch you in the face with my opening start. So he gave me loads of advice. Greg Johnson, who was at Squawker, was really, really helpful and informative to things. And then there was a time when I was at Players Tribune, and I learned loads under Lucy McCallum. She taught me proper interview viewing technique and how to properly do research on a football player. So she's now at Nike, and she said one of the big problems men in particular make when they interview other football players is they interview them like they're going to interview someone they really admire, whereas what they should be doing is interview them like you're going on a date and asking open questions because you're trying to find out more about their lives rather than just force feed them their own Wikipedia page. So that was really useful for me developing my interview skills, and that was also really useful in what would eventually become the book writing process with Marcus Rashford.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that?
It was really fun.
Can you tell us a little bit more?
Sure. So that came about in November 2020. So a signal went out from Macmillan Book Publishing saying they were having basically open tryouts. So they bought book rights to Marcus Rashford for three book deal, 2 non-fiction books. And they said, who wants to apply for the first book? And I thought, well, if you want to win the raffle, you got to buy a ticket. I'll put my name forward, showed off a body of work that I'd accumulated at the Players Tribune and other places at the Athletic. And not too long afterwards, I was on a big Zoom call with a number of people in the Manchester United beat at the Athletic. And I went, well, Danny Taylor's written loads of books and he's written about United, so I'm not going to get ahead of him. I went, Oliver Kay's written loads of books about United and with United players, so I'm not going to get ahead of him. And I thought if there's a short list of 30 people, I'd probably be number 35. And then 2 weeks later, I was on a sports podcast, and you can find the episode somewhere. And there's a point right near the end where, for absolutely no reason, I make a very weird sound effect because I'm looking at my phone mid-podcast and I get a text message going, he's picked you. And I've just gone, so that's how I found out that I got the partnership. Then we had an initial conversation in December time. So it was me, Marcus, members of Marcus's team, and some members of Macmillan Book Publishing all on this big Zoom, much like this. And Marcus and I are talking. And what I didn't realize was this was actually basically a soft interview or a test to see if Marcus and I got on well. And if it didn't, they'd probably find a new writer for it. And Marcus and I had maybe a 20-minute talk, and I just saw all these cameras leave this Zoom conversation. And I'm thinking, oh God, have I absolutely boobed up? And I get a text message going, no, we're just going to leave you. You two are getting on like a house on fire. So that was how the first book happened. And the second book was a similar circumstance.
Oh, amazing. Well, that sounds brilliant. Just someone mentioned about the NCTJ just now. Just a couple of people have asked, and I just wanted to reiterate that. It's nctj.org. It's the National Council for the Training of Journalists, and the NCBTJ, which is broadcast training journalists as well. And like I said, I did that as part of my degree, that qualification. And if you look in a lot of job ads, they do want that qualification, but you can now do a 1 year and you can work alongside it. So you don't necessarily have to just take a year out. You can do it alongside your other stuff. And I do know people in the industry who've done that qualification, and it's been really successful for them. So it's definitely worth considering. Just have a look at nctj.org and all the information is there. And I'll just give you a really, really truncated look at my story, because as Carl said, I'm older than all of you, so it's kind of even less relevant. And like I say, I when I was at uni, I had the opportunity to actually commentate on AFC Bournemouth games. I went to uni at Bournemouth, and it was just overhearing someone's phone call that gave me that chance. And like I said to Nate about being ballsy, I literally just went up to them and said, I couldn't help but overhear your phone call about you looking for a commentator to do games for the club, and I'm really interested in doing that. And he was pretty shocked, but he said, well, okay, I can't pay you, but if you turn up to the next match against Bristol Rovers, we'll see how it goes. And that's how it all started for me. I ended up doing the whole of that season completely unpaid, but it meant that I left uni with, VHS tapes, because that's how old I am, about proving that I could do the job. And actually, even with that, I left uni and thought, I'll walk into a job in sport, just like you said, Nate. Didn't work like that at all. Nothing happened. I ended up going into news just to sort of stay within media. And thankfully, I only had a year of that. It wasn't for me. Although I was doing quite well, I didn't really enjoy it. And a job came up working for Opta, the football stats people. And again, it's such a long time ago. That was a tiny company that employed about half a dozen people, and it now employs hundreds. But I got in there quite early on as a football writer, and at the same time I was working for Capital Radio at weekends, doing broadcast, which is what I loved. And it took a long time to actually become a broadcaster. I wasn't earning full-time wages as a reporter until I was about 25, but it finally happened. And then thankfully it led on to working for other people, and Sky came along, and I've been there 15, 16 years now. And yeah, it was a very, very long road. And it can be for a lot of people. There was a long time where I really wasn't earning very much money, but I just had so much passion for the job, for the industry, that I decided to stick with it. Well, I had plenty of other friends doing other things who, were buying houses, and I was still living at home. So I think one thing I'd say about this industry is, if you don't have that burning passion for it, you're just not going to get anywhere, because you will get downhearted. And I'm sure we've all had setbacks, and they come by the bucket load. Even now, I was talking to someone the other day. I emailed someone about a tournament, and I didn't get a reply at all. And that's still happening to me now in my 40s. So don't be disheartened when people don't reply to you, or you're getting knockbacks, because it is just sadly part of the industry. And I've got lots more thrilling tips like that. But hopefully you've got a little idea there about everyone on the panel, and obviously it's all about your questions. That's what we want to answer, and try and pass on any wisdom that we can. Howard, are we collecting questions?
Yeah, we have some already. I don't mind reading them out.
Please do, yeah.
So the first one is from Peter, who says, what space is there within sports journalism for neurodivergent people? And what routes are there for someone who is in their 30s without a degree? And then I can come to the second one after that. So I don't know who you want to go to for that, Gary?
Well, certainly the second part, I get asked that all the time. And it is tricky, because obviously we've all talked about doing unpaid work to get a foot in the door. And the older you get, the harder that is, because you suddenly have boring things like bills and mortgages and other stuff. And, whereas before you might have been able to just live at home and work for nothing while you're working your way up, suddenly it's not quite so easy. But having said that, I know plenty of people that have done it because they've got supportive partners, or they've been able to work alongside doing unpaid work. So I would say the first thing is to make sure that you have got that an industry recognized qualification, because that would give you the credibility that you're looking for if you're completely changing industry. But ultimately, it's all going to be about what you can show people that you've done. So if you are interested in writing, you need to have some sort of something that you can slap down and say, look, this is what I've written, this is what I've done, because you've got to convince people that you can do the job, tangible proof that you're able to do the job. So yeah, people can move into the industry at a later date. It really can be done. I'm not saying it's easy, because sacrifices have to be made. That's just the reality. You're coming into a really competitive industry, and you're going to be up against people who have just graduated or have been in the industry for 5 years and have a bucket load of experience. So you've got to be prepared for that, but it can be done.
Can I just come in on the neurodiverse part?
Please, yeah.
Yeah. So we've got a few neurodiverse members within our group, the Ability Group in Sport. We have a LinkedIn page where the form to become a member is free. We've got about 60 members, but we all help each other. And one person who's key to this area of disability or ability, as you might say, is Nick Ransom. He's a very persistent consultant in neurodiverse matters, and he's working on a lot of projects. So be happy to make any introductions. And also, like I say, don't let your ability hold you back, because we've all got different things going on in our lives that, you know, life happens. So, and you can change your career at any time. And another example I'll give from my group is one of my members worked for the BBC for 20 years, and then his role changed and his disability didn't allow him to do that, unfortunately. And unfortunately, he had to leave, and he worked in a council environment for 10 years. And then he found us, and we got him a role on the production team at Whisper, which sort of like reintroduced him to the industry and reinvigorated his career. And I believe he's got a job in TV in production somewhere now. So it's always peaks and troughs, as Gary says. You know, it's all about how much commitment you're willing to do alongside that. Like I say, I've done 9 to 5 today, and then like I say, I'm doing tags 6 to 11. So, you know, trying to grow the group and trying to grow exposure. So it's all about how much you want to do. And like I say, on the neurodiversity part, if you want to speak about that more openly, Tags is a forum where you can do that.
I didn't know a lot about Tags, I'm ashamed to say, Nate. Where can people find out more about that?
So we only formed last year, so we're very new. You can find us on LinkedIn. We've got a LinkedIn page, the Ability Group in Sport. We've also got a Twitter and a Facebook, but I think Facebook's turned into a bit more of a business market now, so people are posting less content on there, which we found quite difficult. But yeah, we're on social platforms, or I'm happy to connect with people individually. I'm on LinkedIn, so you can search my name and send me a request. That's no problem.
Okay, hopefully that answers that one thoroughly.
We've got quite a few coming in now, so we might do sort of quick fire answers almost. The next one is, lots of job adverts mention NCTJ requirements. Does someone with a BJTC accredited degree, including media law and ethics modules, need to do the NCTJ course, or does that cover it?
Well, it's not a simple answer, that one, actually, because in my experience, different organizations will view that differently. The simple thing to do would be to apply for the job and see what happens. I think if you've done media law in any capacity, that's going to count in your favor. And I get a lot of people messaging me saying, is it worth me applying for this job? Well, you've got nothing to lose in any situation. And a lot of people end up getting jobs they don't expect to get. Trust me, it probably happens to everyone here. So it's always worth applying. I just want to mention something about CVs as well, because one thing I do for people is have a look at their CV. Anyone listening to this who has sent me their CV in the last week, I'm really sorry I haven't got back to you yet. I will do. I've got about half a dozen that I'm going through at the moment. And you'd be very surprised at how many brilliant people with fantastic experience aren't selling themselves well at all. And they might have a really big personal statement at the top with their own opinion of themselves, saying how fabulous they are and what a great team player they are, and et cetera, et cetera. And all of their brilliant experience is hidden away down the bottom, which is what people want to actually see. So if you ever want me to take a look and give you some ruthless feedback, you can email me at any time and I'll really try and help. It's just garytaphouse@hotmail.com. That just, well, I'm going to crowbar that in while I remember. Thank you. Howard?
Great. Next one is quite a long one, so I'm going to try and summarize it. It's similar to the last one. I've got one question as an extension to Nate's point. I've got my master's in sports journalism from Brighton. I just need to pass media law and video journalism to get my gold standard. Nate, would you say there is anything else I need to do as well as the NCTJ?
To answer directly, it sounds like you're doing the right things, like studying and doing the work alongside the degree is what you need to do. So if you've got that experience at TalkSport, Free Sport, Channel 5, you know, they're great to work for. I've done a few bits for them on their boxing coverage. You know, that is the key. So I wouldn't try and overthink and say, am I doing enough? It's a question that comes to us all. Am I doing enough? You know, all you can do is keep going and doing what you're doing, because like I say, I've got people who were on my course who got first degrees and they're not doing the job. And I've got people who scored 2.2s in their degree and they got a niche going in golf, and now somebody works in darts full time. You know, you can go in this industry different ways, but like I say, keep up the good work and keep doing what you're doing, because you're on the right track.
Okay, thank you. Jordan has asked if they can follow everyone on social media, so I'll answer that one. I'll post everyone's kind of Twitter handles and whatever else afterwards. And then Daniel says, you all mention your variety in reporting for different sports. How hard is it developing knowledge in sports you're less familiar with?
Well, I don't. I realized quite early on that I couldn't do anything else. I actually did a few years at Wimbledon for Smooth FM in the part of the Guardian Media Group, and that was incredibly tough, really long days. I wasn't ready for how difficult that was going to be. Even finding time to go for a wee was a massive challenge, as anyone who's worked on tennis will tell you. And yeah, I just didn't have the background knowledge. So I realized quite early on that football was for me, and that's all I could do. If I had to do something else now, I'd panic massively. And I've got enormous respect for a lot of guys in the industry, people like, you know, Alistair Bruce Ball, who does so many different sports and is absolutely brilliant at all of them. Nothing but respect. I don't know how he does it, and it must involve an incredible amount of work. So yeah, that's it from my point of view. I don't know if any of the others. Ellen, you've done lots of sports, haven't you? That's
yeah,
the thing.
I kind of what I was saying before is so. When I started out, I really wanted to I'd just take any opportunity I could. And I would be like, yeah, I can do different sports. And I was really keen to learn. And now I've got to sort of a similar sort of mindset where I want to do the job to the best standard. And if I can't do that, I'm not going to take that opportunity. So I had an offer I really enjoy working on netball, but I do certain netball work, but I had an offer to commentate on netball, and it was slap bang in the middle of me going away for an international trip for athletics, for European athletics, another athletics trip, and some football. And I just thought football, you know, once you're into the flow of a season, all it is really is like a lot of changing the context, changing the players' names, doing the prep, and you get into that prep flow, and it becomes, it's just a routine. So that you don't have to, obviously you have to think about it, but becomes a lot more second nature. The athletic stuff was like right early in the indoor season, so I'm going to have to work quite hard to get that back off the ground. And I just thought it was a really good opportunity, but I just couldn't do it. I knew I didn't have the time to do it to the best of my ability. And at the end of the day, I realized I wasn't the best person for the job. And at that point, I'm not going to open myself up to unwanted criticism on social media, doing a job where I'm deep down, I know I'm not the right fit. So I'd say definitely go in with a wide, you're open to learning about lots of sports. I think particularly if you're going into bulletins, you need to know a lot about sports and like soak that up. So by like watching a lot of Sky Sports News, that kind of thing, listening to a lot of 5 Live Sport, soak it up. But then there is no harm in picking like 3 or 4 sports that you absolutely love and running with them and becoming the best in that field, taking in that knowledge, whether that's like for me, I'd say that's football, athletics. I do like other sort of smaller sport like triathlon, that sort of comes under the athletics fold, a bit of swimming. And you then find that actually, if I can do athletics, I can do triathlon, because if I'm doing like longer running events, the splits are very similar. If I'm doing, football, then, you find sports that have similarities. But I'd say there is no harm in sticking to 3 or 4 key sports, maybe even less, and specializing, rather than going scattergun approach.
Nate, you're nodding vigorously there. You agree with that?
Well, yeah, as somebody who wanted to do boxing at the Commonwealth Games and got handed judo and wrestling, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Like I say, when you're on when you're on site and you're on a job, you can get handed anything at any point. So as Ellen says, it's better to be expand your knowledge and expand your horizons rather than just focus on let's say football, because it's the mainstream sport everybody wants to do, and somebody like most of us will do it at any point in our careers. But yeah, learning about judo and wrestling was tough, but all I can say is research. Speak to the athletes, speak to trainers, speak to people involved in the sport. Just immerse yourself, do you know what? I probably after the Commonwealth Games, I'd probably watch more judo now. But like when Paris comes around, I'll probably watch judo more. But it just adds another skill to your belt, because then you're more employable then, because like a director might come into the broadcast room and say, right, who knows something about handball? Like, does anybody know anything about handball? And if you know rather than anybody else, then that makes you valuable, because like me, for example, Paralympics, I've covered 6 in a row since London. So everybody was coming to me in production saying, like, what's this classification mean? Like, who's going to win a gold medal today? Like, if you can build that knowledge from that niche, then you're worth your weight in gold.
I'd say there's definitely a balance between that and I think finding sort of that focus in the middle. Obviously you want to know a lot and you want to be there and prepared to say, yes, I can do it, but not prematurely on something that you're not fully focused on.
Okay, jumping straight on. We've got 1 or 2 more questions about NCTJ. I'm going to skip them because we've had quite a few questions on that, and I feel like a lot of them are quite personal to the individual's experience, but if we have time at the end, maybe we can come back to those, or if people want to answer in the comments. So something from David, as someone who has gained work experience at The Guardian last year, how do I continue to build on the contacts I have built during my time at the organization? And his second question is, how important is it to specialize in a sport, particularly as I'm looking to make sport journalism a full-time thing, especially after graduating from uni? So building contacts, networking, and then specializing in sport. Whoever wants to answer that one.
Right. Okay. There's quite a few questions in here that are talking about making a niche, or how do I do this and how do I do that? And I've just said it in the Slack, in the Zoom. Make the damn thing. Close the app, make the thing. You can waste weeks, hours, months, years of your life going, oh, I think I should do this, just make the thing, okay? So, right, if you're going to work for free, work for yourself. Don't work for someone else. You got to own your IP. So go off and make your own Medium account. If you want to make a niche, the way I always think about making a niche or freelancing is there are always people in another room who are saying nice things about you. And the more things you can have under your belt that they're going to say about you, the more hireable you are, right? So with Ellen, there was a point in time where someone was in a different room going, we need to have someone who's knowledgeable about 4 or 5 certain subjects. Who do we know that knows netball? And someone went, oh, Ellen does. Should we call her? And oh, we need someone who's really skilled at broadcasting and is available to travel to these areas. Oh, Ellen does that. Should we give her a ring? And that's the thing you need to do. What's your thing? What's your thing in bullet points? So you can call that a niche, you call that a thing, whatnot. So, for example, when I first came to the Athletic, they went, right, you're off to Southampton. I didn't know anything about Southampton Football Club when I was covering that for a season. And I figured, oh, well, I don't know Southampton as much as your average Southampton fan because I don't watch them week to week. And I'm not a Southampton fan, so I'm not going to be able to tell you about the historical stuff. I'm not going to be able to tell you things that happened back in the day. I'm not going to be able to give you that Matt Letizia interview in the first week. What I can do between now and the start of the season is swat up on everything Southampton were going to do in that season. So I watched hours and hours and hours of what Southampton manager did in previous clubs. And I rewatched all that. I had a FIFA save on the highest difficulty, played that for ages. So I learned all their faces. I was playing Football Manager and I just went, I'm going to be the person where they go, you should subscribe to the Athletic. They've got this guy, Anka, subscribing, who's covering Southampton. They go, what's he good at? They go, tactics. Right? So you look into the landscape, you say, oh, I don't know if there's space for this. Make the space. That's it, right? You've got to close the app. You've got to get off Twitter. And you've got to make the thing, right? If there's right now, you can go into BBC Sounds podcast, and there are probably there's so many football podcasts on that app. There's 3 different podcasts about Sheffield Wednesday. I love the BBC, but they have real problems differentiating why each podcast needs to exist. Whereas you, as a freelancer, I'm going to describe you as freelancers because when you're graduating, you are probably going to work freelance for a long time because staff roles are really, really hard because Mark Zuckerberg is the evil man. You need to figure out what makes you stand unique. And the way you do this is why I told you all to bring a notepad and pen. You get a piece of paper. Like right now, go get a piece of paper and go get a pen right now. And then on the piece of paper, you break it down like this. So 1/2, one big line down there, and you write things like, I do this to one of the people I mentor. He's on this call right now, and I did it in front of him. And then right in front of him, I showed him how you can turn this into making articles you can sell. So then right at the top, you write things I know. And right here, you write things I am. And in each box, so things you know, you write down loads of things you know. So you write down things like your very first job. You write down what languages you know. And then things like you write things like, what country are you from? How many languages do you speak? Which city do you grow up? And on that, you write 5 things you know, absolutely, things you are knowledgeable about, and then 5 things that you are, that consist of your identity. And then what you do from this piece of paper is on the things you say, things I am, I want you to write a headline based on that, based on whatever sport you want to cover. So on the person I'm currently mentoring here, that person was Swiss. And I said, okay, write me a football headline based on the fact you're Swiss. And he went, I can talk to you about what it's like going through the academy as a Swiss football player. I went, there you go sell that piece. No one right now is going to be able to write an article, what is it like going through the Swiss academy as well as you, because you lived it. And then we did another one about things he knows. And this person who I'm mentoring said, oh, he knows someone who's currently playing in the Europa Conference League that he thinks is a very good player because he played with them in the same academy. I went, all right, go write this article and then go prove to everyone before the Europa League quarterfinals happen that should be the player. This is the next big thing before the next big thing. And no one's going to be able to write that article as well as this person because he knows them, right? The big thing you need to do when you graduate, more so than anything, is sports journalism is an ideas-led business, right? And unfortunately, sports journalism has a bit of dead man's shoes. We're all talking here, and there's probably one person who's slightly older than us or slightly more senior than us that we're waiting for them to retire and or die before we can move higher up the rung. But until that happens, you need to show you are good with ideas, right? You need, when people wake up on a Monday morning, right? All these big companies wake up on Monday morning and go, what's the headline? What's the thing we should do? I've just been in the Athletic phone call this morning and everyone went, right, okay, Man United have made the FA Cup final. Tottenham Hotspur have lost 6-1. Wrexham have won that. And I went, who do we know that can write stories about this? The idea now is for you to be someone to go, oh, I know someone who knows Wrexham loads. Should we call that person in? right? And look, maybe you already have those things inside you. Maybe you decide you want to go out and get that, and that's your next challenge. But that's what you need to do constantly, constant ideation. And ideation is hard because, well, it's hard to come up with ideas when you're tired, when you're stressed, or you're hungry. But also ideas can happen through discipline, through using spreadsheets. I can help show you how to create other principles along with that writing thing you can do. But that's how you do it. And to keep in context, never lose a phone number. Someone hands you your business card, you write it down all the time. If someone goes, call me, you call them. And if someone goes, here's my email address, you email them. If you need my email address, I'll give it to you in the chat. And if you don't email me afterwards, I'm going to tell you off.
I think the thing about contacts, I think the reason he asked the question there was because it's a fine line, isn't it, between badgering people unnecessarily to the point where you become an irritant and not doing enough so that he doesn't remember who you are. And only you can judge where that line is. And I would say only get in touch if you've got something to say, not just because you want to pester them for a bit more work or something. So have a good think about why am I sending this email? Why am I getting in touch? It's because I've got something to say.
One of the worst emails you can send is saying, oh, I'm just available to do anything, because I don't need someone who can do anything. Again, it's all about ideas. If you come up to someone with the email, go, hi, I have this idea. Do you think we can place it somewhere? That's good. Or if you go, hi, I'm really interested in learning XYZ. Or I think I can help you with the XYZ. One of the big things you have when you will first start freelancing is your pitching, right? You're emailing these very big companies and saying, hello, I have an idea. Would you like to pay me to write this idea for you? And pitching is a odd art. It's not science. And I've put a thing in the chat showing, giving advice on how I think people pitch, because I think one of the best ways to do that is you send off an email and be, hello, I've been reading things from your publication for ages. I think your publication is amazing for these reasons. And I think that my idea is well suited for your publication. And I think that this idea is really good and should be published at this date. And I think with my experience, should be the person to turn this idea into a very good idea for you, for money. I know this industry is very hard and it can be very underpaid. And there's unfortunately a lot of very unscrupulous people who think, oh, because loads of people love sport and love football and love athletics and love triathlons and love this, they think they don't have to pay you the full amount because your love will carry you through. But honestly, no, internet points don't get you paid, and the love of the game doesn't help pay rent. So my entire way I give expertise and mentor is I want to get you paid and I want you to be able to afford rent.
Yeah, badgering, no, persistence, yes. And I remember when I was at Opta, I had to employ 3 reporters, one to work on each division of the EFL. And the guy who was interested in League One, I interviewed him, and he went on holiday, and he really surprised me by calling me from Mallorca or wherever he was, just to say, and he worded it really cleverly. I really enjoyed the interview. I'm really interested. And it kind of caught me completely off guard that he'd done that from abroad after an interview. And I actually ended up giving him the job because I just thought he was so incredibly keen. It wasn't like he was badgering me for the job. He just wanted to let me know that he was really, really interested. And that was enough for me. So hopefully that answers that question a little bit. It's about nurturing without badgering. And only you can judge what that is because you know the person.
Yeah, definitely. Question from Daniel to Carl. I was wondering how hard it is mentally writing about football when it's something you study, write, and talk about every day. Do you have any tough days? I won't go on to say the rest of it because they're slagging off Manchester United. But
you can slag off Man United all you want. Look, there's tough days always. Like, it's a job. I had a really good conversation with one of Raheem Sterling's early coaches. And he said, the thing you have to understand in sports is the moment you start getting paid for this, it's a job, and you have to treat this as a job professionally. And I am in the realm of public opinion, which means there are people around the place that want me to shut up and die because I have certain opinions, because hooray, football media. So if I go out and say football team blue is going to lose to football team red. Fans of football team red are going to dislike me if the score is the other way around. I spent all season being yelled at by Arsenal fans because I thought Tottenham Hotspur would finish higher than them before the season started. And there was a season partway through last season, Manchester United fans doxed me and started harassing my mother and my brother and said I should be murdered because I had the temerity to believe Ole Gunnar Solskjaer wasn't doing his job that well. Like, this job is hard because every job is hard. This is a job of long days, late nights, early mornings. During the World Cup, I was working 15-hour shifts. And unfortunately, it could be with little pay, especially when you're starting out, which is why, yes, it's good to love it, but also it's really good to know when to take breaks. One of the things I often do if I'm at a party or if I'm at a social gathering is if I'm talking to someone and go, oh, I don't know football, I talk to them more than everyone else because I don't want to talk about football in my spare time anymore. Right? I don't play FIFA anymore. I don't watch Ted Lasso because Ted Lasso feels too much like work. But at the same time, the work is good. One thing I will say is that if you are doing this, it's very important you seek peace in your craft, not in your audience, right? Especially social media can be very intoxicating. Instagram can be very intoxicating. Twitter can be very intoxicating. It can be very easy to fall in the trap of thinking because you are doing cool things and because you are stood next to cool people that you yourself are the coolest person of all time, where I'm not. Like, I spend a lot of time sleeping in travel lodges that are 2 stars and I'm really boring in real life. So I think, yeah, it can be hard, but also it's important to surround yourself with good people, to taking good advice, to block out nonsense noise, and taking breaks. I'm probably not going to make the FA Cup final because I'm going to take a well-earned holiday.
And don't forget, sport by definition is a leisure industry. Therefore, it happens when most people aren't working. Therefore, you will be working when most people aren't working, and you will miss things like your friends' weddings or your kids' birthday parties, which I've been guilty of. So, you've got to bear all that in mind as well. It's not all, fun and games.
To me, I think I might have dropped some of these questions, but from Michael, got quite a long question here. From what I can tell, the 2 bits of things that he wants to know is, how would you recommend someone who might not have the local access go about finding these links? Is it as simple as going out and messaging whoever you can, or can I be doing more? And the second bit of his question, which I don't think we've touched on yet, actually, is in terms of his own writing. I'm presuming he's got a blog or something. How would you recommend going about promoting it?
Anyone want to answer that one? Nate?
As Carl said, find publications that you're really interested in and, want to pitch to them. Like, where does that article that you've been writing fit best? And then you make connections, not with the publication. Don't send it into like info at the Times or whatever. Actually find people on LinkedIn and message them saying, can I have a chat for 10 minutes to talk to you about this article I wrote? And follow Carl's key points, because like, as a freelancer, that's exactly what I did when I was freelancing for boxing, for tennis. I was just pitching ideas constantly, and like I say, there is an art to it. And then don't be disheartened if you don't hear back. But I would recommend, if you don't hear back, always have a 2-week window. So never the next day or the following day. Just like give it a bit of breathing time, and then just remind them. And then if you don't get a reply after that, then it's dead, and move on to the next publication. That's how I dealt with it anyway. And also, one personal tip I can advise: as soon as you get a quote from someone, if it's a person-led story, run it as soon as you can. Don't be lazy and think it's exclusive, because I can tell you a story. I was in LA for the Wilder Fury first fight, and I decided to stay a couple of days after the fight to explore LA and go to all the boxing gyms, because I'm a boxing geek. So went to the Wildcard gym, And Freddie Roach was in there. Freddie Roach, who trained Mike Tyson, very, very famous trainer. And he was also in Fury's corner with Ben Davison. And I had a chat with him, and he was starting to slate Ben Davison, because Ben Davison was a young trainer, and he was just saying, like, he shouldn't have been in the corner. This advice was wrong. And this was just after the fight, after a controversial draw. And I was like, this is brilliant. I'm going to sell this to this person, that person, and spread it around. But I said, I've got a flight to catch, so I'll just pack it up. Nobody else was in the gym. It was just me and Freddie. So nobody else has got this. On the flight home, Freddie then took a cab to a TV network host's mansion and did the interview then. And then when I pitched it, the editor replied to me at Boxing News, and he said, yeah, Freddie's already said that. And I was like, how? Like, I spoke to him in the gym, nobody was there. Oh yeah, watch this interview on US network TV. And he literally just went to town on Ben Davison, and everybody ran it. BBC, Guardian, everybody ran off that back of that one story. And I was like, God damn, if I just broke that story when I got it, then I would have got like 3, 4, maybe even 5 different bits of payment. Because also a trick to it is, if you can sort of like work out different styles of writing around the same quotes, then you can get more money. So like that's another tip from me.
And just on people not getting back to you, someone got in touch with me. Someone emailed me about commentary. It wasn't football. It was a niche sport actually, but I did know someone who I thought might be able to help them. And I thought I must get back to that person. And then life happened, 4 commentaries to prep for, and I just completely forgot. So that person did exactly what you said, waited 2 weeks, got back to me. I felt incredibly guilty, got straight back to them. And it all had a happy ending. But yeah, people in the industry are busy, and they're not sitting there waiting to answer your emails. So take that into account. And you know, I like to think I do more than most at replying to people, but I do forget, and I do move on. So yeah, be persistent, but also be patient.
I think we're good in terms of most of the questions have been answered, Gary. Okay,
that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I just wanted to reiterate, you know, if anyone is taking part in this and they think, you know, actually I'd really like to ask a question after this, please do feel free to email me. I'll try and go through them all. So GaryTaphouse@hotmail.com. And yeah, the other thing is, for anyone who's watching and isn't following me on Twitter, I do post sport media jobs every single day, have done since 2015. I'm up to about 10,000.
God bless you for those. God bless you for those. Honestly,
I think I'm up to about 10,000 now, and that's not me sitting searching through job sites. I can assure you that is employers messaging me directly, knowing that I've got a captive audience of qualified people. So please follow me and make sure you're looking through my feed on a daily basis, because you know, honestly, I get messages every single day from people who have got jobs based on what they've seen on my Twitter feed. So it really does work. And actually, in the last year, I've had half a dozen where they haven't been advertised anywhere else. They've just been on my Twitter feed. So it's kind of snowballed completely out of control to the extent that I can now no longer stop. But that's fine with me, and I'm really happy to keep doing it. But and you can always message me on Twitter as well. I'll always try and get back to you. Is there anything anyone else wants to ask? Because this is your moment. This is your time. We're here waiting and ready.
I think I've got a question as well. I'm not sure if I can do it over a speaker like this, or.
Of course you can. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, cool. Let me turn my camera on, because again, I thought it would be best for me to do that. So I think I've already mentioned in the group chat already, you know, that I appreciate your words of advice, Carl. You've even got me doing the table already. So that's really useful, isn't it? And we met at the event already a couple months back in terms of BCon. So all those words of advice were very useful then as well. But I wanted to ask, because obviously it sort of links into the question that I asked earlier in terms of getting your foot in the industry. Now, I kind of do this on the side, but I work in terms of like Sainsbury's at the moment and everything else like that, really. I wanted to talk about the potential sort of crossover in terms of things that I could take from my sort of customer service role into the journalism field. And I wanted to ask if any of you have been in this position in terms of doing a job that you don't really want to do long term, and looking to do a career like you're looking to do in the future. How do you like motivate yourself in terms of like continuing to achieve your ambitions whilst doing a sort of doing like a role that you have to sort of get by, if that makes sense?
Well, I certainly have. Yeah, I mean, like I said to you earlier, my first job, I got a job on my local newspaper, not working in sport at all, doing like being a news hound, basically going to the police station and getting crime stories and doing all this stuff that I didn't want to be doing at all. I was being paid about $7,000, I think, at the time. And there wasn't much left at the end of the month, I can assure you. And I did feel like, why have I just spent 3 years on a course to be doing this, to be earning substantially less than people who didn't go to uni? And yeah, you've got to have that inner belief. If you feel that you are good enough to do it, and I really did, I really felt that I had the ability to do it. And I was just constantly on at people in the industry to give me a chance. And 9 times out of 10, I didn't hear back from them. But there's always people, and you know, we're some of them, we want to help people. There's a lot of people out there that do actually want to help people and give them a chance. And it's just a question of being persistent and finding them. You know, it's a very, very tough industry, and everyone will tell you that. And it can be really unforgiving. And I know there are a lot of people that get incredibly disheartened. But I do still believe that the cream rises to the top. And if you've got that ability, you will make it, provided you're prepared to put in the work and know that it can, like I said during my piece, it can be an incredibly long road. I wasn't earning a full-time wage from what I wanted to be doing until I was well into my 20s. And I'd been grafting and hustling all that time. And I was thinking, you know, is this worth it? But I genuinely believed I was in the right business, and thankfully it paid off. But you know, it is tough. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. So yeah, I have been in that position, and it wasn't nice. But keep going is what I'd say, and make sure that when you are applying for those jobs, I get a lot of people getting in touch with me saying, I've been looking for a job for quite some time and nothing's happening. And when I look into it a little bit deeper, I find that they're kind of blanket applying. They've got a cover letter and they're just changing the odd name. And I'm afraid that's just not going to work in this industry. It's brutal, and you've got to spend a lot of time on every single application. And you might have to completely change your CV based on one job compared to another. And you need to research that company, and that goes into the cover letter. And I found that really, really good candidates were just blanket applying like that and wondering why they weren't getting anywhere, because they kind of lost faith in the process. They'd applied so many times and spent so many countless hours in the application process that they'd given up. And it was a token effort. So I'm afraid you've really got to put in that time if you want to get noticed. And when I got that job at Opta, what they noticed more than anything was that I used really expensive, thick paper, and it stood out. They actually said that in the interview. Your CV was on really lovely paper, and we noticed it straight away. Something stupid like that can be what gets you noticed. So yeah, a lot of it comes down to the effort in the application process. I do think that gets lost sometimes.
I feel like it's kind of about marginal gains, because there's so many people applying for the same job. And I remember I was already, I'd already got my job. I think it goes way back. Basically, I've got a little bit of a passion for graphic design. Like I never use it. I never use it really outside of these things. And it's very basic graphic design. But for every CV I was doing while I was trying to get from Radio Cambridgeshire up into network, I would redesign the header and make it look like it's everyone, like people would joke about it at the time, but like I'd put the, like Ellen, so one letter in a block like BBC, and then I'd change the color based on whether I was applying for BBC News, so change it to red and white, so I'd have the white blocks and then the red letters in the middle and then the red block header, and then if I was doing sport, yellow and black. And it was just like making my CV look fun and then changing it. And the feedback, even if I got to the board or even if I didn't get a board, people would say like your CV was fun and that stood out. And then sometimes it was actually like because I was only 19 when I was applying for stuff like this, like it was the actual lack of experience that did let me down, but it was like making that stand out. And then I remember I did it again for 5 Live and then put like my name in like the circle, did like the 5 Live logo because I'd already had a job there, and I thought, I've got to show that I'm a bit creative, and I knew that the team looking would know me and go, oh, that's something Ella would do because she's a bit silly like that. And one of my mates saw it and made a joke about it, and then 3 months later I was on my way out of, well, it was probably a bit longer than that, I'd already decided I was going to go freelance, so I was leaving 5 Live and I was looking over his shoulder and I was like, he's gone and copied and done exactly the same thing. But like I just sort of he did it sort of like enough that I just thought, do you know what, that's funny because you're taking the mick out of me, you know, a couple of months back going, oh, that's silly. And then actually when it worked for me, he's gone, oh, actually, maybe I should get a bit more creative. So it's about finding those little things that are going to make you stand out, because there's lots of people who've gone through university or have gone through similar paths to me and have done local radio and worked their way up. And it's like, what makes you stand out? Find that little spark, that little sparkle. And even if it is, you know, as silly as like changing the header and making it look fun, like it might seem small, but it does make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely proved my point. It's almost like that was planned. It's kind of like, remember, every year we're churning out graduates in this industry, and you've got to find a way to stand out from the crowd, even if it's just by like 1%. You've got to get noticed, because people who are getting 500 applications, they're going to spend 30 seconds looking at each one, and you've got to get noticed in that 30 seconds. And I think, as I say, I think some people, it's very easy to give up on the process, and that's, you can't afford to do that, sadly. That's, again, brutal industry, but that's how it is. I really hope that helps.